Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Low Budget Review Show. I am your host, Eric Smith. Today, I'm talking about what if Marc Spector was host to Venom. This is a Marvel Comics novel published by, that looks like it says Random House Worlds. And it's by Mike Chen. I should probably mention that. This is actually the third in a series of what if novels so far. But the first one that I have read, I have the other two. And what this is about, essentially, is, well, first of all, the what if series. You know what? We'll get into that in a moment. What this is about is what happens when the Venom symbiote takes over Moon Knight. And I mean, it's there on the title, and I'll go a little deeper in a moment after the moment that we were going to get to when I said in a moment the first time. For the too long, if you don't care about any of this stuff, for the too long didn't watch folks, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. I may be biased because I'm a huge fan of Moon Knight and of What If. Now, let's get to that first moment that I mentioned, which is What If. What is it, for those of you who don't know? It's a comic book that I believe started in the 70s. And unlike DC's Elseworlds, which basically can do anything at all they want, I mean, technically, so could What If, but Elseworlds can be anything. What If did was take some established part of a comic book story and would just change it and see how that affected the greater story. So you would have, I think I talked about this in my weekly wrap up when I talked about reading this book, or that I was going to read this book. What if Uncle Ben hadn't died? So in this story, we've got Spider-Man's origin. It's exactly the same as it was up until that point. When he's at the wrestling ring, he's getting ripped off by the manager. The manager's getting ripped off by a burglar, and Spider-Man doesn't stop him. He's like, hey, why should I help you? You're trying to rip me off. Why should I go out of my way to help you and stop this burglar? Ha! Now you're getting ripped off. That burglar goes on to kill Uncle Ben. Spoilers, I guess. In the What If, Spider-Man decides to stop that burglar. I can't remember why. There's some dialogue going on, but he makes the choice to stop that burglar. Therefore, that burglar doesn't kill Uncle Ben. Therefore, Peter Parker doesn't have that guilty moment and the lesson of with great power comes great responsibility driven into him by that guilt. How does that affect the story? This is what If did. Mostly, 90% of the time. Sometimes it was a little different. It was what if, one of them was what if the Marvel bullpen became the Fantastic Four. You know, that didn't take any story and give it a little tweak. But for the most part, they took the stories we all knew and loved, tweaked it a little bit. Where does it go from there? Fantastic premise. I love alternate reality stuff. Some of the, after the original series ended, some of the later stories went a little different. And now there's been 2 seasons of an animated series on Disney Plus. That's from the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is where they're doing their tweaks. And now we have these books, and they're kind of doing their own thing. Oh, one of the conceits of the What If series was the Watchers, who I believe had been introduced in Fantastic Four. Watchers are these beings that just watch everything that's happening in the universe. They're not allowed to interfere. And so the Watchers, a Watcher, would narrate the story. And they would say, like on the first page, this is what happened in the world you know, but what happens on a different world when something different happens, and then you go into the story. So, all of that, excuse me, all of that being said, in What If Marc Spector was host to Venom? Right off the bat, we have something different because the Watcher is the character America Chavez. People who have seen Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness should be familiar with the character. I actually had to look it up, Google, and see if this is something that had happened in the comic books. So I'm way behind on my comic book reading. Did something happen where America Chavez became a Watcher? Or is this a conceit of this series? Now, it seems that the 3 books that are out so far are tied together. It seems that America Chavez is the Watcher in all 3 books, and there's a threat that runs through all 3 books. I didn't know that was going to be the case, which is why I read the 3rd book, even though I have the other 2. I really wanted to jump into the Moon Knight one. It doesn't necessarily affect the story as a whole. But what we have is we start with America Chavez talking a little bit about watching. But we start with Marc Spector in a mental hospital. Frenchie's there, Gina's there. We don't need to get into all of these characters. This video could go on forever. You know I like to talk. They're in this mental hospital. They break out. And then all of a sudden, another Marc Spector shows up. And some shit goes down. And the Marc Spector 2 has the Venom symbiote, and it leaves Marc Spector 2 and infects Marc Spector 1. And that's essentially what leads into the greater story. So, first of all, if anyone doesn't know Moon Knight was first introduced in the comic book series Werewolf by Night. He was simply a mercenary for a group called the Committee who wanted the Werewolf by Night captured or killed. And the writer of the comic was like, well, a werewolf, the moon, night, there we go. And not a lot of character to Moon Knight. He's in these 2 issues of Werewolf by Night. Then he was in another issue later. And then he was a backup in the Incredible Hulk black and white comic book magazine. And then eventually he got his own series. And through all of this, his character was developed. He's Marc Spector, a mercenary. He's betrayed. He's out in the desert on an archaeological dig. He is betrayed, left for dead, and the Egyptian god of the moon, Khonshu, brings him back to life. And so he's now Moon Knight, but he has, in the original stories, there is also Stephen Grant, the millionaire, and Jake Lockley, the cab driver. But they are only identities that he takes on depending on his needs. If he needs to, talk to people on the street to get information, he's going to be Jake Lockley, the cab driver. If he needs to, he likes to live the high life, so he's Stephen Grant a lot. And he's got his beautiful girlfriend, Marlene, and all sorts of money and stuff. But Jake Lockley, Stephen Grant are just basically masks that he puts on, just as Moon Knight is a mask that he puts on. It's not clear whether Khonshu is real or not. A lot of his friends think it's just a thing in his head, that he wasn't really resurrected by this Egyptian god Khonshu. Later writers of Moon Knight tweaked the story a little bit, and eventually it became that Marc Spector actually suffers from dissociative identity disorder. And Stephen Grant and Jake Lockley are actually personalities in his head, and they can take him over. So if, because of stressors or because of the situation, an actual distinct personality will take over. He's not acting like a character that he calls Jake Lockley because he needs to do certain things. Jake Lockley, the personality, has taken him over. Stephen Grant, the personality, has taken him over. And other writers made Khonshu literal. Khonshu is the god. I can't remember which writer it was that came up with the bird-headed god that we see that he's talking to. And so the character of Moon Knight has progressed, has changed. Warren Ellis created the Mr. Knight persona, who some might know from, if you've watched the TV show, is the one in the very nice white suit with the mask, the white mask, with no cowl, no cape or anything. So I'm going over all of this because this book does quite a bit to integrate so much of this Moon Knight history. I don't know that I'm giving too much away. I don't think this is really delving into spoiler territory. But Marc Spector #1, the one that escapes from the mental hospital, has the dissociative identity disorder, but also has Khonshu in his head. The bird-headed, skeleton bird-headed god, Egyptian god, is also in his head. He does this mind space thing where the three personalities and Khonshu sometimes can come together basically in his head and talk. The Marc Spector #2, the one that's coming from another universe that has the Venom symbiote as part of him, also has the dissociative identity disorder, but not Khonshu. And one of the things I like about it is they always refer to Marc Spector #1, the first one that we're introduced to, as Marc, and the other one as Spector. And the characters themselves say, we don't want to confuse ourselves. We'll refer to him as Marc, we'll refer to us as Spector. Little earthquake there. So that was very good, I think, in the writing to keep the reader from becoming confused. So Spector has come from another Earth with the Venom symbiote on him. The Venom symbiote leads him, goes to Marc, but in that transference, Khonshu is able to go into Spector. They don't know. They're not used to Khonshu. They don't know who the hell Khonshu is. And then Marc, Venomized Marc, has taken off on this mission, Spector trying to stop him. It's much easier to understand when you read the book. So this is what's going on, and Venom / Marc is trying to find something called the siphon, but P-S-I-P-H-O-N. It's something from the comic books, but he's trying to find it for this big threat called the Whisperer. And that's the thing that seems to be covering all 3 of the books. I didn't know this was going to happen. So the Whisperer has something to do with the first 2 books as well as this one, and possibly sometime in 2025 there's going to be more of these what ifs. I don't know if the Whisperer is going to be there or not. But again, I didn't need to read those first ones. It didn't confuse me at all reading this one. Excuse me. So, I like that the author, Mike Chen, has incorporated or tried to incorporate so much of the very wild, diverse history of the character of Moon Knight. And in his writing, each chapter is from a different personality's perspective, and none of it becomes confusing. Basically, half of it is in third person. If it's Marc or Jake Lockley, it's third person. If it's Stephen Grant or Venom, it's first person. But it all works very smoothly. Am I forgetting anybody? I don't think Khonshu gets his own chapters. So the chapters jump between Stephen and Jake, who are sharing they're sharing a body with Spector and Khonshu, and then Marc gets kind of suppressed once Venom is there, so we have Venom chapters. But it works very well. Venom has his own voice. Stephen Grant has his own voice, and then anything that's in third person is just sort of third person, generic third person, I suppose. But it's not difficult keeping all of the personalities together. The story moves along at a pretty decent pace, and I didn't know where things were going to go. And there are characters. Well, there are characters that were essentially main characters throughout Moon Knight that show up, but there are some Easter eggs to minor characters here and there that don't matter. You're not going to miss anything if you don't get it. There are references. The Avengers are mentioned. The werewolf is mentioned. Jack Russell, the Werewolf by Night. Some other Moon Knight villains are mentioned. A particular Moon Knight storyline, the Siphon storyline, is mentioned. And there is a character who was created for the Moon Knight TV show on Disney Plus, who has since been introduced into the comics. But I'm so far behind in my comic book reading that I haven't actually gotten to that issue yet. I had to look the character up, and I know what issue she makes her appearance in the comic books, her first appearance. I have it. Haven't gotten to it yet. I think I'm 5 or 6 issues away from it. That's how far behind I am. But I like that they've introduced this character. So, really well written, really interesting, well paced. As I said, I give it 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. Here's the thing. I don't know if this is going to appeal to anyone who isn't already a Moon Knight or a Marvel or a What If fan. Even if I said start with the first one, which is what if Loki was worthy of the power of Thor, something like that. I suppose I could just look in here and it'll tell me. Oh, it's just what if Loki was worthy. I have that, haven't read it yet. The second one is what if Wanda Maximoff and Peter Parker were siblings? Ant-Man, Uncle Ben adopt Wanda. And then what if Marc Spector was host to Venom? So knowing what I know now, that I probably should have read them in order. Again, I can't, unless you're already a Marvel fan or a What If fan or a Loki fan, I don't think the general public is going to spot one of these books and pick it up. So I guess kind of take that for what it is. I really enjoyed it. I think if you are a fan of the things that I mentioned, I think you're going to enjoy it. It's a well-written, interesting, fun, exciting, heartbreaking book. I just don't think it's for general audiences. I could be completely wrong about that, but because what the hell do I know? I am the audience for this. So what if Marc Spector was host to Venom by Mike Chen? 4 out of 5 stars. Right. That's kind of an awkward way to end that. Do I have recommendations to go along with this book? Well, I mean, I would say read the other What If books, but I haven't read them, so I can't really recommend them. There are some, in my opinion, really great Marvel novels. Some not so great. There's a lot of novelizations of the comic books. Some great, some not so great. As far as original stuff, I guess I'm going to recommend some Marvel prose. I would jump on, for older stuff, harder to find stuff. There's Avengers versus Thunderbolts. Love the Avengers, love the Thunderbolts. Great book. There's X-Men and Star Trek The Next Generation. I don't remember the full title of it. Love a crossover like that. Some of the newer stuff, there's a Marvel Zombies novel from Aconite Press. There is a I don't remember what it's called. But there's one with Satana, and I think it's Jennifer Kale and Ghost Rider. That's really good. Check out Aconite Marvel novels. Unfortunately, they're no longer publishing, but I think you can still get them on Amazon. So there's a lot of good Marvel novels out there, old ones, new ones, and I usually pick them up. There's a lot of young adult stuff that I don't have, but a lot of grown-up stuff that I like to pick up. Question for this video: are you a fan of Venom? Are you a fan of Moon Knight? Do you not care at all about any of this stuff? And are you familiar with the what if of it all? I think I've pretty much answered all of those questions already within the body of this video, except maybe the Venom thing. I'm generally a fan of Venom. And I like a lot of the different permutations. I like when he was Agent Venom, when he was bonded with Flash Thompson and working for the government. I like the Lethal Protector era, which was his earliest solo era. And I do like some of I think it was Donny Cates that was writing it. Sometimes I get him mixed up with the guy that was writing Immortal Hulk. But I liked that. I liked what was going on just a few years ago with Venom. So Venom fan, huge Moon Knight fan. One of my favorite comic book characters. I have 4 omnibus volumes. I have the 2 that encompass his first series. I have the 2 that encompass I think it was the next series, Marc Spector Moon Knight. I have a bunch of trade paperbacks that cover some of the smaller series. I think there's only like 1 omnibus that I don't have, and that will basically complete what I want for Moon Knight. And I'm getting the current run, which I think is fantastic. So yeah, I'm a fan of What If. I'm a fan of, it would go Venom, What If, Moon Knight, way up here. One of my favorite characters. But what about you? Let me know in the comments below. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here at the Low Budget Review Show. Please like, share, and subscribe, all the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, I'll have links for my Instagram and Bluesky in the description below. That's all I've got. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith, and until next time, read more books.